Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Down the Donut Hole podcast. And today we thought maybe we'd get into a little history. Well, these days of all the nervous news about the Constitution, how we got where we are, sort of thing. And later on, maybe we'll touch on a few things that we the people do have control of.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of nervous news. We've been playing around. Yesterday we walked backwards to find the roots of April Fool's Day and examined some possible explanations for why we can still are playing along with that little joke.
Was this April Fool's Boxing Day then?
Yeah, Boxing Day is the day after Christmas in England, historically, called Boxing Day because the Lord of the Manor and his ladies, they would box up some of the clothes that they had.
Oh, so they weren't fighting
sufficiently.
No,
it wasn't fisticuffs. It was
gotcha.
boxing up things, which then they would pass along to members of, their household staff or maybe the neighboring town. You can hear my voice, Dave.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've got this raspy voice today, a little bit of a sore throat. So if I sound incredibly sexy, please try to understand. It's still me, and I'm not trying. So you, too, kind of have a thick throat, but it's pollen.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's been crazy here. It's beautiful. I guess the trade-off for having a raspy throat or a sore throat or sneezing and watery eyes, all of that stuff.
You can get sultry with your voice.
Oh, it's so beautiful. But it is gorgeous outside. I like to get up early and kind of watch everything wake up. Not every day. I won't claim that. But it's absolutely beautiful. And in the span of the last week, we had blossoms out, but you could still see through the trees bordering this little property. And now you can't. Everything is greened out, and it's just beautiful. And especially in the morning when the dew is still sparkly on the leaves, it's really, really lovely. So the price is this voice. But some people like it. And Dave, at various points in our history together, has been very thankful and hopeful that I'd lose my voice altogether. Admit it.
No, not really, no.
Yeah. No, you're just not going to admit it. And my kids always celebrated it too, because I couldn't boss them around as much as normal. So, there's always a silver lining, I would say.
Sure.
All right. We have played around the last couple of days. For the most part, we've talked a little bit on Monday about the nervous news and all of that. And then we talked about Kelly and what happened on Sunday. Kelly and the kittens disappeared. It was a long search. We found them finally late in the evening. And there was great relief to be felt because the weather was horrible. And there's a lot, we've said many times, a lot of owls around here, fox and hawks and all kinds of things that would make us worry about Kelly's babies. Anyway, so that's all good. The babies are in the box. Everything seems to be going great. They're getting fat and fluffy and cuter and cuter every day, which there's nothing like a box of kittens to kind of relieve the nervous news and all of that.
It's true.
We've heard that there is a possibility that President Trump thinks there's a pathway for him to have a third term.
There may be, actually.
Like how?
I'll bring my idea about that.
Are you going to tell us, or is that what best?
No, I will.
I'll
tell you my thoughts on it, but
go for it.
You first.
Well, no, you first. How is that a pathway?
Well, tell me what Go over
I'm just concerned.
Well, we got the constitutional. That clearly is against that. But I got thinking, and maybe I'm probably not the only person that has thought of this, but
what?
I think there may be a possibility. Well, he got asked that, and from some reporters recently, I saw a clip of him being interviewed, and that's the question that they had. How do you think you're going to do this? Oh, the usual thing. There's some ways we're looking into, or whatever. And I think the reporter actually offered, well, if JD runs and he gets put in there, you'll just tell him what to do, kind of thing. He said, well, I don't know exactly. I don't remember exactly, so I won't go on and on about that. But
I don't know that JD could get elected. Maybe he could with a full endorsement. But we have to remember something, and this sounds really humanitarian. This might sound like a mama, but President Trump is 82. We saw what that office did to Joe Biden. God, the man, it was difficult. That is the hardest job in the world. And when we expect our senior citizens to sit in that chair and shoulder the criticism and the responsibility and all the obligations that go with that office, I think we need to get real. We don't want a young kid in there because we don't think they're mature enough. But there comes a line that we should say, thank you, sir. You have served this country to the best of your ability. And this is not a nursing home. This is not a daycare center for others. This is the Oval Office. This is the seat of power for our land. And frankly, it is time for you to, hand over the torch and go enjoy yourself. You have a beautiful home down at Mar-a-Lago. You have your golf courses. You have so many things, so many really great blessings in your life. And after the years, you have your family. You deserve a chance to just let it down and enjoy yourself. Just become a private citizen. You can still do committee work. You can still help out at rallies because you are tremendous at that. But I would say, don't stress yourself up about how to prolong this, because by the time this 4 years is over, you will need a break. You've been through a lot. It's time to just, give it a rest, enjoy your family. You have beautiful children, grandchildren, and just, I know that's what I'm looking forward to, and that's what I enjoy about being retired. I mean, even doing this little podcast, now that I have to do it. I mean, we sit around the breakfast table and we visit every day, and we talk about current topics and things like that. But that's a different thing.
That's one reason we started this. It was like, hey, just turn on a recorder. I mean,
we're doing that anyway.
Talking about all this stuff anyway.
That's it.
Oh, and by the way, in case you're wondering, Des is not here. He must have had a lot of extra deliveries.
I know, it's weird without him, isn't it? I miss his humor. I miss his humor. But, real life calls. And like we say, this started out as just sitting around having coffee, and then it developed into this. But when you must do it, it's a little more serious. You have to be more careful about what you say. You have to check sources. And that takes a lot of extra time. So it isn't just, a conversation over a cup of coffee lasting just that long until the coffee goes cold or you've finished it. Now there's a little more work that goes to it. And I find that it's more taxing on me.
Well, except for the
used to
fact
be.
that we often go more than 45 minutes at the breakfast table.
At the breakfast table, yeah. But I can always say, hey, I got to get out of here. I have work to do, real work to do. We live with a very gentle footprint. And so a lot of the things that go along with running a house, we do by hand. You just do it. And I hang clothes on the line. Those things, while it's less expensive and less of an environmental
that
impact.
reminds me, I haven't said this yet, but we're proud to say that our podcast is 100% solar powered.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of that. That's one of the reasons why we're real glad that the sun is shining nice and brightly, because everything charges up a lot quicker. So that's a great thing. We even travel with little solar panels, which is a wonderful idea if you're thinking of ways to do things. They sell these little solar panels. Dave got them for us that are about the size of a notebook page, like a school paper, about that big. And they're very flat. You can pack them right with your like a little tablet or a laptop.
Yeah.
Or so we travel with tablets, not laptops. And again, we don't check bags. We usually just use the overheads. And so everything has to be very, very tightly consolidated. Yeah. And we travel for an extended period of time, mostly, hiking and that sort of thing. which because we're older, we have to be very conscious of weight and, the distribution of the load and things like that so that we can still do it because we use public transport to a high degree. And so, that's something those little solar panels really help out. And we even use them sometimes here to charge up the phones or, just it's.
Well, we have bigger ones here at the studio, of course, but the little ones really do work very well. If you're traveling and you're waiting or your next conveyance is late or whatever, you do see a bunch of people like searching around for a place to plug in to charge their phones and all that stuff. But all we have to do is step outside and put
or
the panel
put them in a
sun.
sunny window.
Yeah. And they're just that small that you can carry them with you. However, let me just, we're off track here with the subject, I think, but
we'll get back to nervous news. It never goes away. So
you can't just buy a small one and expect that it's going to work. Unfortunately, though, you kind of have to take advantage of a certain company who does, I will say, very, very nicely. They do that part nicely, and that is that you can return things fairly easily.
If you test it.
You have to kind of test them, until you hit one that really does work for the size that you're looking for.
So, in other words, don't buy it 2 days before your trip. Buy it
I guess what I'm trying to say
considerably
is
before your trip and start using
exactly. It's a process. But when you find one, then, and they are out there, but sadly, most of them are not. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that don't get discouraged and say, "Oh, well, this doesn't work.
Right.
I got to get a bigger one," which most people would tell you. It does. They're out there. You just have to test them.
Kind of weed through it and take advantage of return policies. And they will pick up, won't they? Or do you have to take them?
No, you have to drop them back in a UPS drop box, I think. But it varies depending on where you live. But I think generally that's what happens. But
and that is a good thing. That's something to be thankful for. Generous return policies. Don't underestimate that. That's a really good thing for people, especially now that more and more people are doing deliveries, having stuff delivered, basic, even groceries, things like that. And if the company is good about returning things, then that's to be commended. And again, balance, guys. If something is good, say it's good. If something is bad, say it's bad. But balance out your picture of whatever it is, whether it's dealing with big companies, whether it's our government, what it is.
Yes, I do try to find something good everywhere.
And I will say I have to thank Dave because he handles all of that solar power stuff. I know how to use it, and I do use it, but he's the one that goes through all of the test phase.
Who's that?
Hey!
Oh, here he is.
Come on in.
He had a lot of
Pour
extra.
yourself a cup.
You have a lot of extra packages today or something?
I'm sorry.
Come on in. Sit down.
Hey.
Join us.
Oh.
We missed you.
Oh, God.
Pull your mic around there.
Yes, we were just talking about charging phones with solar panels.
Well, we're off the track a little bit.
We're way off the track
Oh, yeah.
because
I'll have to listen to this later.
Yeah.
yeah, you will. We started out, we were talking a little bit about President Trump talking about a third term.
Oh, it's Liberation Day.
It is Liberation
Oh, and I
Day.
almost missed it. I almost slept through it.
It's Liberation Day has to do with when the tariffs, the trade tariffs on our neighbors are set to drop, to begin. And so there's a lot of concern about that. And there's concern over the weekend, especially about him saying there are pathways for him to have a third term, to which I'm encouraging him, don't worry about a third term. Get through this one. You, like us, are a senior citizen and you deserve to think about yourself and, just have an opportunity to enjoy your blessings at some point. So we talked about all of that.
Yeah, good luck with making that a smooth. Give that a smooth try to go for a third term.
Plus, there's quite a jump between all the rhetoric saying day one and, 8 more years.
Yeah, no, that's right. And he's still in his first 100 days.
Yeah,
you're still energetic, and this is new. But once the grind settles in, then it gets harder. and
Well,
harder.
maybe he's worried that if he ever becomes just a regular old citizen again, he's in big trouble.
Yeah,
I got to stay president or I'm screwed.
yeah, that could be it. Yeah.
that may be part of it. I wanted to
That's
talk
a
a little
valid
bit
point.
about our Constitution. And it occurs to me that our Constitution is, first and foremost, a contract. I mean, we look at
true.
it. We look at it and we think about the Constitution as a beacon or as a guiding light for all of these principles of governance that we have celebrated and held very, very dear. And indeed, we've been the shining example of what self-governance among the governed or for and by the governed can look like.
And taken for granted.
And taken for granted. And we have to remember that it is a contract signed by each of the colony, well, the Declaration of Independence, which our Constitution replaced, that it was the states that ratified their participation in the idea of union. And we all know that it was meant to make each of those states stronger in alliance with the other states than they would be individually. But if it comes down to the place where being part of a federal system is no longer working for the governed, the ones who signed this contract, i.e. the states, if it's not working for states or it's working for some states but not others, then that contract has to be reexamined. And my point with saying this is...
Well, that's why we do all the amendments and stuff,
That's
right?
why we do
Yeah.
the amendments. That's why we agree to the amendments. That's
So
why
you're
the
saying-
power of the legislative branch and the judicial branch has to be kept sacrosanct.
So you're saying an amendment for a third and infinite number of presidential terms?
Any
Just kidding.
any changes to that Constitution has to be agreed upon, and we have to ask ourselves, does this change the fundamental alliance?
And it's hard to change it, isn't it, to amend it.
It is hard.
And it should be hard. You shouldn't be just like, well, let's do this. Let's add this to it. Then it loses all its kind of magic, I guess.
I think the Constitution has been written in such a way that it's allowed for growth to this point. It's allowed for a high degree of variability in interpretation based on current understandings and current impressions and the way the world is working, in any particular time period, consecutive time periods, consecutive eras. But now, with federal funding being pulled back from the states, being dangled as a carrot for, agreeing to certain conditions for receiving that money that maybe feel like they are against the belief systems of those states, then it calls into question the whole contract. And it's like any other business deal that you get into. If it seems like it's more trouble than it's worth, or you're paying out more than it's worth, and I think that certainly the current administration is looking at every deal. And I think with that same mindset, you need to understand that this is a compact between each individual state and the idea of whether or not union is better at this time than not. Now, I'm not advocating for secession. That is not what I'm saying. That what I am saying is, there's an old saying, the tail goes with the hide. And that means that you can't separate, you can't pull out stuff you don't want from stuff that you do want. You have to take the whole hide.
And
it's one thing.
Don't states have a right to secede if they choose?
I have not researched that.
No, they don't?
It wouldn't go easy. Didn't we
Civil War.
didn't we have a test run on that?
We haven't had one in a while.
But I think I think we need to go back to the Constitution and understand how it came together. And we do know that originally our Constitution was based on the ideas that were put forth in the 1200s with the Magna Carta. And that was about the rights of individual, the rights of the governed. The barons were worried that the king had gained too much power, that it was possible for him to arrest people unfairly, that they could be detained forever without being charged. So all the rules of habeas corpus were set down, meaning you have a right to a fair trial.
And thankfully, we learned that lesson.
Well, I think there's some things that we have forgotten, and that on American soil, you have those rights. Under our Constitution, those rights are an absolute. They're a given. And they don't extend just to American citizens. They extend also to immigrants, but to everyone, so that there isn't, if you have great power, if you have great wealth, you are equal to the poorest, most downtrodden person in front of the law. That's why when you see images of Justice holding the scales, she's blind. She has a cloth, a wrap over her eyes, so she can't tell the difference between who's rich and who isn't. And that's to symbolize to us that justice doesn't care about that. And even the king had to answer to the laws under the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta defined church rights and powers and limitations. It talked about the barons, and basically it made a much safer, a much more equitable, fairer, better place to live, frankly, when those laws were set down in 1215. Think about how long ago that was.
That was a few years before the United States.
Several years before the United
So they've been
States.
doing this before us?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Certainly. And that was part of the reason why the colonies finally put up their Declaration of Independence, because they didn't feel they were getting representation in front of the law.
And people forget that it wasn't all cut and dry for the colonists, because they were British citizens. They were loyal to the crown. I mean, a lot of people didn't want to form a new country. They were just happy being part of
the Tories, they were known. They were loyal to English law. Usually those people were the ones that it was working for. I've always been surprised, and I won't quote numbers, but I've always been surprised looking back at American history that the production, the gross, I won't say national because it predated the nation, but the gross production of the colonies was impressive. They were importing or exporting furs and tobacco and foodstuff and wood and all kinds of things. They were making a significant amount of money here. And when it was being taxed to the point that they didn't feel like they were reaping enough benefit from staying with the governance of their mother country, England, then that's when things started to come apart. And I think we need to tread carefully, make sure that the tariffs that are being laid down now are not going to unduly harm our collective economy. And we have to make sure that there's safeguards built in so that this doesn't feel like a deliberate attempt to crash the economy in order to usher in cyber currencies.
People will be throwing
cryptocurrencies.
People will be throwing our tea into the harbor.
And then what? Well, as long as they don't throw in coffee, you're all right, Des. So those things we have to look at. I was looking at the contribution of the Iroquois Confederacy, which is a collective of first 5 and then a 6th Native American nation who joined together under what they called the Great Peace. And the Great Peace was an agreed upon system of governance. The Iroquois Confederacy, for anybody who doesn't know, was the first 5 tribes: the Senecas, the Oneidas, the Onondagas, the Mohawk, and one other one. Oh, the Cayuga. The Cayuga are based around Ithaca, New York. The Onondagas held the central fire. So there were 2 on either side of the Onondaga Nation, and I want to think they're around Syracuse. They own a huge swath of land, still thousands of acres in New York State. And all of these nations sent their representatives to the central fire, which was with the Onondagas, and they were the toughest nut. They were their leadership was very terrifying. And so the Senecas, the Oneidas, went to the Onondagas from the west, and then from the east, the Cayugas and the Mohawks. They all met there. Later, the Tuscaroras migrated from North Carolina up to that area. The Iroquois Confederacy was powerful also in southern Canada, in Ontario and Quebec, those areas. All of northern New York State, and down to the Pennsylvania border, northern Pennsylvania, because the Seneca Territory, that part of that is in northern Pennsylvania.
So they all joined together?
They joined together.
Because wasn't there a lot of fighting with...
There had been quite a lot of fighting. The Great Peace was brokered eventually by Hiawatha. You've heard of the Song of Hiawatha by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. And that tells the story of how Hiawatha came to help encourage those terms of peace among the first 5 nations, and then later the Tuscaroras as the 6th. And what it was a concept of what they called a longhouse. They considered themselves the people of the longhouse. The Senecas, which was the furthest west of the original 5 tribes, they were the keepers of the western door. The Mohawks were the keepers of the eastern door, closer to the Hudson River. Onondagas, as I said before, keepers of the central flame. And then you have the Oneida and the Cayuga, which are nearest off-center from the central flame. They actually have a flag that was recently developed in the 1960s, or maybe it was the 80s, and by modern-day citizens. But they based it on Hiawatha's wampum belt, which had a purple background. I was surprised when I saw what that looked like. I was surprised that it had a rich purple color background, but it's based on dyes that they got from quahog clamshells and some other clamshells that were from, on the eastern side.
And isn't that like a color for royalty or something?
Yes. Well, it would be in Europe, certainly. Purple was a royal color. And here it is from these clamshells. They've extracted this dye. So the background is rich purple. And then they had whelk shells that they made little beads out of, where all of this was a beaded belt. And each of these little beads was sewn into a design that looked like it's very straightforward design. If you imagine a square first, a line that comes from the left side of this purple rectangular background, a purple line up the center, and then a square outline. The interior is purple, another line joining a more of a rectangular outline, white, all of these outlines in white made from these little whelk shells against the purple beads that were from the quahog shells. Then in the center, an eastern white pine, which symbolizes the central fire, and the Onondagas, who were the main keepers of this confederacy, this agreed upon confederacy. Then the same design, a white line, a rectangular, a rectangular box outline, and then another white line, and then a square one against this rich purple background. And this is a flag representation of Hiawatha's belt, which was very symbolic. I understand that the Iroquois Confederacy, that the Native American tribes that make that up, have recently asked to have returned to them other wampum belts that were in museums down in the New York City area and around other places. They want control of those because they say that this is a symbolic language that we understand. These belong to us, and I understand.
Yeah, they have to ask.
I know they
They
should.
should be on like loan, right?
Well, they were taken. I mean, if we look.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Nothing was really on
No,
loan, was it?
They didn't really get a lot of say in those matters. So I think there have been a lot of repatriations, and a lot of the museums and that have sort of resented having to do that. And this is a worldwide phenomenon. A lot of things that were taken under imperialistic movements by nations all over the world, cultures are asking, can we please have our significant objects back, because they mean something to us, more to us than they do to the world. And if you would like to see them, come to us. We'll gladly show them to you. And I think that's fair. I mean, if I had something really nice, a piece of art that meant something to me, that reflected my family.
See, I don't want to go off on a tangent and make what you're talking about seem silly, but I will make this kind of correlation, is that there's been a movement recently in the last few years or whatever, about comic book artists getting their original artwork returned to them. And so it helps because the families, a lot of these old school comic book artists are gone now. And so the families can actually resell that original artwork for lots of money, because a lot of them, they were works for hire technically, but like Jack Kirby comes to mind as like one of the greatest, probably the greatest comic book artists. But it's kind of like, it's a question of like ownership. It's like, no, he created that. That was his artwork. They printed it and everything. So I don't know. Sorry.
I think that I don't apologize, because I think when you are the creator of something, when you understand the symbolisms of a piece of art, or whether it's visual art or whether it's something written, and there is a deep resonance with you, for having produced it with your hands and understood what all of that symbolism means, that another person could walk by. Now, until I actually looked up those squares on Hiawatha's belt represent longhouses. And they represent each of the separate nations. The white line that connects each of those boxes, almost like a link in a chain. It's not, the boxes do not link like chain links, but they are linked with that bridge. It's like the little lines, the white lines, touch the center of those box-like devices. But that represents the unity, the decision to be joined. And our Constitution represents a decision to be joined, a decision to be equal under this document.
So
under this
was there
agreement.
actually influence from the principles of the Confederacy, or is it just an interesting parallel?
No, absolutely. It was because they were so powerful in the area. And they knew a lot of languages.
And what was it again? The Iroquois Confederacy?
It started out being known as the Iroquois League, and then it became known as the Iroquois Confederacy.
And that predates our Constitution?
Yes.
Interesting.
By hundreds of years.
So another thing never mind.
And what's interesting about certainly the Iroquois Confederacy is it is hereditary. So the sons of chiefs will succeed the chief, but they are chosen by the matriarchs, by the women. So they can, if a young man, the eldest son of a chief, is set to inherit the leadership of each of the longhouses, which those boxes represent, if you remember, the matriarchs decide whether he's worthy of that, whether they think he can do a good job or not, whether he can safeguard his people, make wise decisions, and rule for the well-being of all, not because it's a power trip or something.
So it was like a huge system of government.
Absolutely.
For them.
And the correlation between the United States Constitution and the Iroquois Confederacy is the consent of the governed.
So are you saying they didn't need us? It sounds like they were on the right track to.
Oh, very much so. Very much so.
It does make you, America's okay, I guess. But it makes you wonder what might have been.
Well, it tells me that at the very beginning, right, that they were willing to be influenced by something that came before.
Well,
but now it doesn't seem like that's it. We have to reinvent everything.
Well, I read something, again, nervous news. I mean, it's nice to take a little break and step back and look at the history. I read something that our government sent out letters to foreign businesses who do business in the United States, who trade with the United States, and they had a questionnaire about whether they had gotten rid of their DEI initiatives because the United States would prefer not to do business with with business entities, with commercial organizations from other world places, if they are still engaging in what the United States determines is discriminatory practices such as DEI. And other countries are responding to that with, you gotta be kidding me. You might think that you're all powerful, but you don't control our country. If DEI is something that we're committed to as a way of promoting social justice, you have no right to try to tell us that we have to give that up. And so most of the businesses are saying, I ain't answering that. And the governments of the various countries are saying, we're going to look into this further and find out exactly what companies received these questionnaires. And it's got a bad smell. So we're starting to stink the world over. Our policies, our behavior, our concepts stink. Over the weekend, I read that Richard Branson of Virgin.
Oh yeah, what happened to him? Where's he been?
Well, he's been around. He's had his own deals to deal with.
Wasn't he going to space too? Didn't he do that?
Yeah, I think he did. But anyway, he's saying he never thought that and this is the gist of it. I am not quoting him. But the gist of it is he never believed that in his life he would ever see the day that the United States was not considered a trustworthy ally. But he said the days of that are over. It wasn't, and he didn't soft soap it by saying that they're ending England.
England.
He didn't try to soft soap it and say we're seeing that being diminished. He said simply, the days of that are over.
Well, you got to try something new.
Well, we'll see how it goes. But my point is, before you go tearing up the Constitution and trying to diminish the other branches of the Constitution, especially the House of Representatives, the Congress, these are the representatives of the people. You are ultimately, but because we use the Electoral College, you have to understand that you got a plurality of the Electoral College votes that put you in there. And I'm not talking just about President Trump. I'm talking about everybody who sits in that office. As long as we have that Electoral College,
that's not a democracy.
There's some questions about that. And there's a lot of people who feel that it does not give them the same one man, one vote that our Constitution should guarantee.
Well, it really is like a class system.
Well, it is. If some states have more electoral college, and granted it's based on population, but they do not have to vote the way the people voted. We found that out. And so that we have to look at that system. And while we're overhauling, because there's so much talk about we're going to require photo IDs, yesterday I guess there was a big thing about trying to preserve proxy voting in the House and the Congress. And I think we need to make sure that those systems of representation for the people, that they are respected. Absolutely.
I always had to have show proof who I was when I voted in person.
Yes.
I mean, I have to have a license to drive. So I don't know what the big uproar is about that.
Well, I think it's become more, with all of these accusations that we've been conducting unfair elections, and there's been all of these, accusations of fraud and everything else.
Yeah, they're saying like Russia was involved in stuff.
Yeah, I think there's legit concerns about that. But if you can conduct commerce, if you can order stuff with your credit card and all you have to do is say that, I fail to see why we're still making it hard for people. We've said it before, we do not have a car. So we have to plan transportation. And it's funny because the precinct, we're supposed to vote. We would have to get a hotel room overnight.
Oh, you're talking about proxy voting. Mm-hmm. So people that can't. Yeah.
Well, for the representatives.
Yeah.
And especially the new mothers and that. That's not. We need to accommodate everybody so that everybody gets a shot at being a representative. And I don't want to hear anybody say, oh, you're a young mom, you got your hands full going home. Because that is a perspective that certainly reflects the very real concerns of half the population.
And I've always said that there's only one. I mean, forget about race. I don't care about race. I like cultures and different things. That's because you can't do anything about your race, so it's stupid to argue about for me anyway. But I've always maintained that anybody can be president in the United States except for one type of person, and that's a poor person.
We agree with that.
That's right.
We agree with that. I know Bernie Sanders talks about campaign finance reform, and we really do have to look at it. I know down here in Florida, the kind of money that they raised for the elections down here is absolutely obscene.
You got to do more than talk, and I think that's why a lot of people are like praising Trump's fever pitch efforts to do things, because people want to see they want to see the government doing things, I guess.
Yes.
But it has really kind of exposed how the government functions, what the powers are. And I guess this will really be a good test of, as it's been tested in the past, of how strong our government is and how tough the Constitution is. If it works or if it does, maybe it doesn't work at all and we've been fooling ourselves.
Well, I think as long as we protect the sanctity of the other two branches of government, so that there are checks on the executive branch. And when you're putting out executive orders to the degree that we're seeing now, I think it gives people pause. I know that among Republicans, they're pretty much holding firm that this is, they think, a good idea. They're still in favor of Trump's cuts. President Trump, he is our president. His cuts and some of these other things that he's doing, they're okay with that at this point. We'll see as time goes by.
So you were talking about the third term thing,
yes.
And that amendment is not very old, actually, is it?
The third term?
Yeah.
The limit?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. To tell you the truth, Dave,
FDR, it came after FDR, right? Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
I think that's right, yeah.
Because he did 4 terms. He died in the 4th term.
Yeah, that's right.
So this was during World War II. So.
Not very old, no.
No.
But that is the main barrier, of course, to President Trump's claim that he's going to look into a third term. But
I
I
know,
like
it's
I
kind of like
teased at the
breaking up
beginning.
with a boyfriend and you let him move back in and then he goes nuts. And
Like I teased at the beginning of the show, I do think there is possibly a way. It's just my thoughts.
what do you think? Okay, what is it?
There's always a
Got 1
line
minute.
on every ballot to write somebody in. And if that were to happen, and I think there's a great chance that could happen, then he wins by write-in, right? Then you've got the will of the people versus the Constitution.
And then that would have to be tested. I don't know.
Yeah.
So wow, that's not something I thought about. We are once again coming up on our time limit. And we thank you, as always, for joining us. We hope you found something interesting. And we do hope that today you'll find a little bit of time for you to go do something that's fun, to appreciate something that's beautiful or just makes you laugh. And don't get too upset about what we're seeing, because the more nervous we let ourselves get, the more we can be taken advantage of and the less effective we are in standing up for, the appropriate limits. And with that, we'll say goodbye.